how do you develop your own style, but yet you have that diversity that you can do all sorts of different things? Where do you think that comes from? Or are there ways that people can improve that?
I'm just interested in a lot of different things, and I have, there's certain things that I'm sort of like hyper focused on that I obsess over, comic books and horror movies and artwork and you know there's like a bunch of weird things that I get, but Star Wars, like a bunch of weird things that I get hyper specific about, and then everything else that I'm just like, well, I'm interested in that too. Like I keep an open mind. If I see something that interests me, I like to go take a look at it and see it. Like I can watch a movie trailer, and if it's not, I love horror movies, or I love superhero movies or whatever. I saw a trailer for like Wuthering Heights, and I was like, well, that looks cool too. Like I would like to go see that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just always sort of like but putting stuff inside my brain, and that sort of helps me develop a point of view. And so then when I get a job and I'm doing My Little Pony, I'm making My Little Pony differently than how the other people are making My Little Pony, because I'm not like looking at the show and going like, let me make my version. Let me make that. I'm going, let me make my version of that. Mm-hmm. Or I get a job writing Deathstroke or The Thing or, Star Wars. And then I'm going like, what's my version of that look like? And in some cases, you wouldn't be able, the naked eye would not be able to detect what's different about my thing. But it's just that I've developed a voice by, living a life and putting things in and experiencing things. And that's what everybody does, like if I write a comic based on an outline and another writer writes that something based off that same outline, they're going to be two different works, because they're like, what's coming out of me is going to be different from what's coming out of somebody else.
Are you able to separate, like if you're reading, and again, maybe you don't. I did listen to that Off Panel episode, by the way. Great listen. Off Panel is a great show, so everyone listen to that. That's a great interview for sure. So I'm assuming you're the person that, like, you do read comics just because, like, as a fan. Yeah. I think some people, I don't know how many comic creators go that route or go a different route, but if I worked at McDonald's, right, do I want to make the burgers at home? Then probably not. I probably want to save that for when I'm there, and I want that separation. So when you're consuming, whether it's like you mentioned, if it's movies, if it's shows, if it's other comics, if it's other works like that too, are you able to separate that, or is there no separating? Like, hey, this is maybe an idea that not that we're ripping it off from that, but this inspired me in this way of another idea. Can you separate and just watch things just for fun, or does that not exist?
No, I can. And I sometimes think it's because I'm just like, I have friends that are creative or that are filmmakers or comic book writers or whatever, and we'll watch the same thing and they'll have such a different experience of it, because they're the kind of people that are more analytical. They're more locked into it. And they're like, once the thing disappoints them, then they're just like, well, this is trash. Like, I couldn't enjoy that.
Right.
I'm not watching it like I'm not a creative person. I'm watching these things and I feel like I'm empathetic to the challenges of making things. And so when things don't work, I give it a little more leeway than I think other people might. And then when things do work, I get more excited than I did when I wasn't writing stuff, when I wasn't making stuff. Like when somebody does something in a comic book that really wows me, when I was a kid reading stuff, or even when I was just drawing comics, when I was just, working on ponies or Star Wars or whatever, I would be impressed by a line or a page turn or something. But now that I sort of have my head in the nuts and bolts of like putting together an issue from top to bottom, sometimes I get very impressed by when somebody can really pull off a moment in a comic or pull off, do something that I haven't seen before. So I tend to, when I see a movie or when I watch a TV show or read a comic or whatever, I can sort of trudge through the parts where they weren't as inspiring. And if they never get to the inspiring part, then I'm like, well, that was not worthwhile,
Yeah.
But I can watch, a movie that's like a C+, and if it has like an A+ moment in it somewhere, that's good enough for me. Like I've seen hundreds of movies. I'll see hundreds more. You don't have to, not everyone has to, be Star Wars. Like
Yeah.
not everyone has to start perfect and end perfect and have a perfect middle. Like I'm okay with just having a couple shining moments. But then when I make stuff, I hold myself to a standard of making something that I think is solid the whole way through. But I have the empathy when I'm watching other people's stuff to be like, well, I didn't quite,
Yeah.
Yeah.